Hello, everyone. My name is Kathleen Johnson, and you are tuning into the Creactivators podcast, where creativity meets activism. And today we have a very special guest, Dr. Kathy Toogood. She is joining us from Medicine Hat, Alberta. And I was just letting her know that I'm born and raised in Calgary, and I've never been to Medicine Hat in my entire life. So this is going to be a great conversation. She's a great speaker, teacher, has a long history in education in Nova Scotia and Alberta. And what we're going to do is get started with her telling us a little bit about herself, giving us the cool notes on who she is, and then we'll get into her book. Take it away, Kathy.
Thank you, Kathleen. I'm so honored to be here with you today. And I love this focus on creativity and justice and social action. I was born in the Maritimes and began my career as a teacher there. I moved to Alberta early on, and I loved working with high school students and found I really enjoyed working with students who had struggled and hadn't been successful in school. And so I loved finding a path and removing barriers for those students. And that continued as I worked as a district consultant and then a principal in elementary schools. And I went to work for the government. And through that, I just kept learning. And I loved my master's studying the success factors for at-risk learners, and then carried on afterwards to study women in leadership through my doctorate. And that was life-changing for me, Kathleen. For me, studies are always not just intellectual, but also personal and social. And so it changed the way I thought, to talk to several female educators who were also mothers about their experiences, how they learned from parenting to apply to leadership, and how their work in leadership changed them and how they learned and grew. And I continued my work after that in government as a manager, and then I work as an adjunct professor teaching teachers now who are aspiring leaders. And so I love that I got to do lots of different things, keep learning, keep contributing, keep meeting amazing people as I go. So, and my research turned into the book of Women Thriving in Leadership Practices for Cultivating Wholeness and Community. And I'm so excited to be here today with you to chat about that.
Awesome. So one of the things that I was curious about when I kind of stalked you a little bit on LinkedIn was this whole aspect of women in leadership. I think it's always something very interesting to me because it looks very different for us. You know, we're shouldering the burden of, as you mentioned, parenting. We're shouldering the burden of doing domestic labor and also having to help provide financially, or else it's just the one person working kind of scenario is just not feasible. A lot of the times nowadays, it's a luxury to be able to be home. And I've done both. I was a stay-at-home mom for 10 years and then ventured back out into the workforce. I'm empty nested now. So it's as my life's gone through these phases, it's looked different for me. And now I'm starting to think I might be a leader. So it was an evolution for me because I'm used to being someone's mom or somebody's wife. And then you get wrapped up in that. And it's hard to conceptualize yourself as a leader when you've always taken a back seat to other people in your life. So walk us through that a little bit. What does that look like, women in leadership?
Thank you, Kathleen, for sharing your story, because this is the truth of women's lives, is that we're responding and things are shifting as we go through all those stages that you've shared. And so I thought all those things as well and wondered, could I be a leader? And I had some unhelpful notions as well that came from religious thinking that I had to sort of release for myself about being a leader. And for me, I define leadership now as taking responsibilities for the quality of your own life and then sharing your gifts with others. And Kathleen, you are a leader. You've got a podcast, you're meeting what you're passionate about and taking action on that. And to me, those are acts of leadership. And I really wanted to release the concept of leadership, just that it's not only positional. or hierarchical. We don't need permission from anyone else to lead. And I knew that as I stepped into a consultant role and then as a principal, it was amazing to me. I was like, oh, all of a sudden I have this position and title of a leader in the school. And do I go anymore? And then I realized I'm responsible for people's behavior, but I can't control it. And so it was very disconcerting for me as a new leader. I had had lots of intellectual preparation through, principal preparation program, and I had done my master's in educational leadership. And then it was like, oh my goodness, and what does this mean now in terms of running a school? So I got a high school teacher and consultant, and then was appointed as a principal of an elementary school, which is often the path. And so I really drew on my experiences at that stage as a mother, because I'd been a high school math and science teacher. So I was like, how have my daughters experienced elementary school? What can I learn from that experience that helps me shape this idea of leadership? And I agree with you very much that our experience of leadership is different than men. So I'm very careful of not saying women are better than men or worse. There's so many amazing male leaders that I've worked with and learned from as well. But as you described, we're carrying this burden of care for others. And when I wrote my book, it was kind of two groups of women I was thinking about primarily. And I thought about the high achieving women who are working so hard, they're smart, they're capable, they're efficient, and they're holding it all together, but they're leaving it all on the table. And it's so easy to get burned out because we think it all depends on us. We're taking care of everybody else. And then I saw on the other side this group of women who would say to me, especially when I was having a bad day dealing with the ugly stuff, they're like, oh, I wouldn't want your job. And I saw all these capable women. And I thought they should be stepping into leadership. But what they saw was not attractive, this sacrificing yourself and being exhausted all the time and feeling overwhelmed. And so I thought there has to be a different path. There has to be a path of thriving where we get to, like I say, take responsibility for ourselves and say, I'm going to do this much, and then I'm going to take care of myself, and I can say no to things. I have to be able to say no to things if I'm going to have a position of leadership, as well as lead in my home and be well myself, and to show other women that there's a path where you don't have to sacrifice yourself. You can say, here are my gifts, here are my strengths. I want to fill this gap, and I'm going to step in and do something about it. And so absolutely it involves positions of leadership, but I think the real work of leadership, and I call it the personal work of leadership in my book, is in our mindset, in understanding who am I, what do I want to offer to the world, and how can I find a sustainable way forward of doing that without permission, without waiting for somebody else to call me a leader. And so that was sort of my motivation, was really empowering all women to step up and share their gifts with the world, own that name of leader and taking action, but also to care for themselves and say, I'm not happy in this work. What can I do to make that different? How can I care for myself? Can I make a different choice about the focus? Can I learn something? Can I take initiative to these things that I really care about? Those are all actions of leadership in my mind that help us thrive personally and also share our gifts with the world.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. I like the holistic approach to that. You're not just focusing on, oh, my title is ED of XYZ in this agency, but it's having agency, personal ownership. And I want to talk about that aspect of permission. You mentioned something about permission and also your religious experience, as I had a religious experience with that as well, that I think enhanced me receding and feeling like it was virtuous and good for me to make myself smaller. And I didn't realize it was actually a process of erasure. And I don't know if that's for every woman. I certainly don't want to talk down on anybody that's staying at home and who isn't a religion or anything like that. But for me, it was a very isolating and diminishing experience where I learned subservience was what was most desirable for a woman. And it was, unfortunately, in my situation, abusively enforced. And so When you talk about like permission, I think that is a key aspect for a lot of women is taking that position and owning it without asking anybody, is it okay if I do this? Because nobody is going to say, "Oh, look at that wonderful woman over there. Let's give her this." You have to really be assertive. And so when you're working with people or groups or women or organizations, how do you frame that in terms like so I don't want to say so people aren't threatened, but I kind of want to say that. Like how do you frame it so that this woman can step into her thriving and then also be prepared, mentally prepared for the backlash or the context that has to happen in, which is patriarchal.
Mhm. Absolutely. It's so interesting, Kathleen, because it wasn't until I started my doctoral studies and started reading feminist literature, I didn't see myself as oppressed or, I didn't realize. And I relate that to this is the water that we are swimming in, right? It's like a fish. Does a fish know it's in water? That is just the environment that it's been in all its life. And so that process of self-discovery, whether it comes through reading or trying something or meeting new people and finding out something else is possible. And I'm always careful as well, Kathleen, because those messages can come from society. It doesn't have to be a religious experience. There's lots of faith communities that uphold women and really empower them. But similar to you, the time frame or the organization and so on, that made me feel that I had to be smaller. And it was reading a book called Why Not Women that made me think, why are we not all using all our gifts for the betterment of the world to enhance our communities and the world? And it felt like that permission. So I love the idea that I am giving women permission to honor their gifts and their desires and to believe that the things that we want, our passions and our those things, they're good. They're planted in us so we can offer them to the world. And when we align, and Frederick Buechner, this quote has come through different people, and somebody else told me it was Socrates. But when we align with what the world needs, that's our vocation, and it fills us up instead of draining us as we do that. Where your deep gladness meets the world's deep need is that sense of calling and vocation. And the world needs everything. So if you're an artist, the world needs that. If you're an engineer, the world needs that. If you're a leader, you've got leadership gifts, the world needs people to step up and address the gaps that they see more than ever. And it's interesting, Kathleen, when you say, "How do we do this without offending?" Because my intention is not to offend, and certainly I've lived within a good girl archetype most of my life, pleasing and fitting in with what seemed to be acceptable and most important, beyond me. So it took a whole lot of energy to say no to things that were expected of me sometimes as a mom. No, I'm not going to be the soccer mom and be there every time. I'll take my turn, but I'm not going to arrange my life around that. Or no, I'm not going to take on this responsibility when I'm exhausted, when I don't have energy for it. I'm working full or part-time, taking care of my kids and even studying when I chose to do my master's and my kids were in elementary school. That was a whole big thing to say, this is what's calling to me. And I love that thought of studying and it helps me offer my gifts to the world. And for me, a beginning thing was writing a mission statement. And Lori Beth Jones has a book, The Path. It's a nice formula. And I wrote this mission statement. My mission statement is to pursue, inspire, and nurture grace and excellence for my family and those in my circle of influence. And so reading that book and writing that sounds too big for me to pursue, inspire, and nurture grace and excellence. But it was also super empowering because I was like, does this opportunity or ask, does this help me pursue, inspire grace and excellence? I don't think it does. It doesn't help me do that. And so it was this way of giving myself permission. If this is my mission, what helps me do that? And so if I'm going to study to do my master's, to be a better educator, to be better prepared to make a difference, I'm going to have to say no to some things, right? So we're like, as a family, we're like, I'm not teaching Sunday school. I'm not being a soccer mom, it's work, family, and studies. And for a couple of years, we arranged our life around that. And it was transformational for me in opening my mind and learning and thinking new ways. And so that sense, there's a time when we have to give ourselves permission, right, to step out of some of those other ways. And I did lead within a church setting, small groups, and stepped up and organized things. But I also sensed there was more for me, and good friends can make the difference too. I talk about the things we can choose, and choosing our companions is such a key piece of agency. So when somebody else says, I see these gifts in you, and I believe that your work goes beyond the home. Your work as a mother is important, and my work went beyond that. And so that affirmation from a companion, a friend who saw my gifts, and also then the permission myself to say no to things that were not mine to do, actually gave me more energy and possibility to excel at the things that were mine to do. So I feel like as women, perhaps we need a little bit more of that. As men, they're from little boys, they're given permission and expected and encouraged to step out, share their gifts, and focus on that. And as women, from early on, we're often encouraged to focus on care at the sacrifice of using our gifts well. And we can do both. Is what the message. We can do both. It all counts. It's all powerful. And in fact, and this is what I believe, for those who do have children, parenting your own or set, there's so much to learn from that. I think that enhances our leadership abilities, our ability to multitask and hold many things and organize lots of people. Those are excellent skills that actually help prepare us and help us step into leadership and have those transferable skills. So it doesn't have to be a barrier. It's actually an asset that can help us take
Yeah.
those into other arenas.
Yeah, that's awesome. And one of the questions I had for you is what is the difference? No, I'm going to actually no, I'm going to backtrack and ask one first, and then I'm going to move on to the other one. I have a chapter in my book called Managers and Leaders because I believe there's a difference.
Yes.
And one of the things that stood out to me when I was researching that chapter was people work for leaders and they work under a manager. And it doesn't feel great to be managed. Whereas, a leader is inspiring. However, we need management. We need that skill of keeping something on track, like a project or a department. And that skill is definitely needed. But how does one, if they are a manager and they feel stuck managing, how does one build the skill set of leadership?
What a great question. And to affirm, we need both, right? We need people who are managing tasks and leaders as well. And so that is a great piece. I think for me, this starts in relationship, right? And I talk about my book wholeness and community as I thought about what are the big buckets of my beliefs and value and my leadership philosophy. So it begins in relationship and the sense of once I get a sense of pursuing my own wholeness. Who am I? What are my gifts? What do I want to offer the world? With that comes a deep respect for other people's gifts and wholeness and wanting them to thrive and wanting them to be well too. So I think in both positions, when we come from a position of I have a piece of the puzzle and something to offer, and everybody else at the table does as well. So leadership is not about control or power over in my mind concept of you what were the words you used? You worked for a leader and under a manager. That sense of hierarchy. I don't like that sense of hierarchy. I love this sense of we're in this together and we've got this, mission. We want all the kids in our school to learn well. And I don't have all the answers to that. I've got a team of teachers, admin assistant, educational assistants. We need everybody's insight to do our best work here. And so I think you're right. People feel it when they work under somebody instead of with somebody. And I remember a foundational concept when I was doing my master's was working with, not doing to. And it was in that context, it was how do we work with students instead of doing to them. And I came to see that as a foundational way for how I related to everybody. I thought, wow, this impacts my parenting. This impacts how I relate in the church or in the community. Do I want to work with, or do I want to do to, or have people do to me? And as adults, and this might be another place as a leader, we say, what do people need? If they're new in their role, they may need a little more direction and support to help contribute to the organizational goals. But as we see people blossom, they need less managing or doing too. They have more good ideas. And so to me, my form of leadership is how do we empower everybody to use their voice, to contribute their gifts, to share their lived experience, which helps us do better work for whoever we're serving, right? When we embrace diverse points of view and lived experiences, it's like, oh, not everybody grew up the way I did. Other people have different experiences, and we need to serve and honor and support and learn from all those people with diverse experiences as well. So we just strengthen the quality of our work when we honor everybody's lived experience and their sense of expertise and background knowledge.
Yeah, that's exactly true. So in that vein of coming to the table, flattening hierarchy, everybody have something to contribute. What does reciprocity in that look like?
So important. And this is, again, sometimes it's the notions of leadership that we've seen modeled for us. I know when I became a leader, when I was assigned as a principal, I'd never been an assistant principal. I'd been a consultant, done all this intellectual preparation, and then I was assigned as a principal of an elementary school. And I was like, what did I ever do to prepare me for this? And so I knew in that position, I knew I didn't have all the answers, right? So it helped prepare me to work in reciprocity, right? I knew I had this amazing grade 1 teacher, for instance, working for me. And I knew I couldn't tell her how to teach kids to read. I thought, this is magic. What she's doing, her skill set, her expertise and honor. And so this whole sense of recognizing that I'm incomplete on my own, that I can give, but I also receive. And I love this principle that Christina Baldwin articulated of ask for what you need and offer what you can. So to me, that sense of reciprocity is a beautiful way to be in relationship. And it's great when we're going through hard times, but it works out really well all the time, really, to say, so when my first leadership experience, the school I was being ended up closing. And so that final year when we were going through this turbulent time of consultation, are we closing, are we not? It was very emotional. And I just said, here's the thing. Ask for what you need, offer what you can. And so people did say, I'm applying for this job. Can you find out more? I said, absolutely. And others said, I would love to bring food for a potluck lunch today. Fantastic. That would help us all to be fed and nourished. So that sense of, and then that asking for what you need, it makes you a little bit vulnerable, but it also makes you fully human. And I found people respect and honor you more when you share your vulnerability and say, that's not an area I've got expertise in. Help me understand what all of you folks share what you know. And when we empower others to share their expertise and their gifts, it's just like everybody benefits instead of holding the sense of leadership as I know everything and everything goes through me. It holds things up, and you probably are not the best person at all those things, right? It doesn't create a thriving community. I really believe too is everybody wants to contribute, Kathleen, right? Like people want to feel that what they're offering makes a difference. So when, as a leader, you make it clear that you value and their contribution makes a difference, that sense of reciprocity, I need you, your insights and your skill today made all the difference. That everybody, that it's like, I need to go to work today because I'm seen and valued and heard. And then that creates an environment where other people can thrive as well. So this concept of mutual thriving to me has a reciprocity. It's in giving, in receiving, and witnessing, bearing witness to each other and accomplishing things together.
Yeah, I love that. Mutual thriving.
Mutual thrive, and that's what we're
Yes,
going
that's
for here.
awesome. So, this is a podcast where we talk about creativity with social justice work. And you mentioned storytelling,
Mhm.
that it's a part of what you do. And I noticed storytelling is huge now. Even just a few years ago, you'd mention storytelling, and people be like, what is that? What does that even look like? And now there's a trend with even in job interviews, they want you to tell the story of your skills rather than just say, I went to school here and I did XYZ in the ABC position. So, why do you think storytelling is becoming such a big thing? And how do you use it in what you do?
Thank you, Kathleen. Well, first of all, stories are memorable, right? If you go to a presentation, will you remember all the statistics? What do you remember? You remember the story that they tell. And so I believe storytelling is powerful for that reason because people remember it. And my research methodology was actually narrative inquiry. And so narrative everyone associates with story, but the inquiry is let's ask questions, let's dig into it. How was that story significant in your life? And so it was interesting as you share the trend people would say to me, is that real research? That's just stories. How could that be me? But it has such great power. And so here's a couple of stories about how this was so powerful. When I did my research for my doctorate, I had six participants. And our last time I said, I have learned so much. This has been amazing to sit with you. I have 5 to 8 interviews with each person and narrative inquiry. You go deep with a smaller sample size. And they said, no, Kathy, we so appreciated being able to do this. They said, in some cases, they said, I didn't know what I thought until I said it out loud to you. And so storytelling is powerful for us because, and especially if you're an extrovert, they'll say extroverts think out loud, right? So we actually gain insight into our experience by telling the story of what happened. And so that is one very powerful piece. And then those participants said, essentially, Kathy, you were a witness to me. How often do I get a chance to think about my work, to go back through seminal experiences and inquire into the figure of what was really happening. And so asking somebody else to tell their story about an experience and to pay attention, to bear witness, to say, wow, that sounds like a really important experience that shaped you is such a powerful act. And then one of the principles that I loved that Jean Clendon articulates is that when we're telling stories, we can live and relive, and we can tell and retell our story. So I love this principle of you don't need to be stuck in a victim story, for instance, right? So my first year of teaching, for instance, I could look at and say I was not very successful. I struggled in the community. I didn't have a lot of support from the administrators in that school. I didn't get hired back to that school, which was a real blow to me. I'd always been a sort of a high achiever and an excellent student, and that to not get the job back again was really hard for me. So I could tell that as a victim story, or I can tell it as a learning story. I could say that was a really hard year, but you know what? I to a different school. I had good support. I started getting creative. I started finding joy in my teaching. And now that experience as a first year teacher, when I became a principal, it's like, oh, how do I have compassion? How do I express support? How do I let teachers be vulnerable and keep growing instead of feeling that they're incapable of teaching? So that story totally changed from victim to learning experience to how do I be a school leader who makes a difference in other teachers' lives and supports them through those challenging assignments. So we can take a story and say, this is what happened, and we can find the meaning in it over time as we go along. And then the third thing is storytelling and asking to hear other people's story is so powerful for building curiosity and empathy for other people. One of the assignments that I give my students in my class on social and cultural foundations is I say, find a friend or a colleague who's had a different experience than you And it could be a different race, different culture, to us LGBTQ, somebody who's just had a different experience of life. And we kind of brainstorm some questions to ask them to tell their story. What was school like for them? Who supported them? What was hard? And it's always a transformative experience. And like, I had no idea that this person, who's working in my school, they're an immigrant, they're an EA, they're actually an engineer with a master's degree, and they've experienced this discrimination and they haven't been able to work in their field at their level of education. And it opens up, it helps break down stereotypes and biases. They're like, I had no idea that was their story. And so storytelling helps us deepen our understanding and also of ourselves, but it also helps us learn more about other people and the world and the strength and the skills that people bring. And it helps us dismantle those biases and stereotypes when we hear the story of becoming and growing up of strengths and challenges and overcome. So I just think storytelling is so powerful as an opportunity to help build a community of mutual thriving. How can everyone thrive when we don't know their story, when we don't know what they need, when we don't know what they can offer to the broader community? And storytelling helps us get to that place, I think.
Yeah, that's so huge. There's so many big concepts and I love when I do interviews and there's concepts that might be new to me. I don't know. My audience is pretty smart, so it's probably not new to them. But when I hear about those things that stay in my brain that you've mentioned, like mutual reciprocity and permissions and these kinds of things, like there's a whole thread I'm noticing to how you work. And so that's any organization is lucky to have you working with their people because it just sounds like such a wonderful thing. Because I think a lot of the time when we know like for a long time, I didn't know what flattening hierarchy even meant. And so, like, to have somebody such as yourself that can unpack that and make it real is really important. So I want to just make sure I get your book title said in its entirety because it is a full concept. Women thriving in leadership, practices for cultivating wholeness and community. So, what was your main message? And also wanted to mention the Canopy Consulting, and Canopy is spelled Kanopy for anybody that's interested in working with Dr. Toogood. What was your main, we talked about a couple threads and how your work unfolds, but what was your main message? And obviously through the title, your audience was women, but what did you want those women to walk away with the most?
Thank you, Kathleen. So it was funny because I knew I had this book in me and I started writing and it was after a few chapters. And so that's one that we haven't talked about so much anymore. And so it struck me, a practice is something that we do repeatedly. And that is what has power to change us. And also, I think that another key concept in the book is focusing on what we can personally control. And one of my concepts, I love you use the word agency. And there's a lot of things we don't control in this world, but we can control our thinking and our being and our doing. And so the book really, it has practices and it has stories. And then I was so excited. I kept meeting amazing women. So I had 6 participants in my doctorate work, and then I kept meeting amazing women leaders. So there are actually 12 participants, and identified only with pseudonyms to protect their privacy, but it's full of stories. So what's a practice if you're not happy in your life or you think I want to engage in leadership? How can I shift my thinking, my doing, and my being? And so my thinking, we can feed our minds encouraging and empowering material. So reading books about leadership, uh, listening to podcasts, following people who inspire you. These are ways that we can shift our thinking. Have that thought that like nobody cares what you think, Kathy, or you'll never get a position of leadership. It's like that thinking is not helping me, and I can choose. I can choose to think different things. And so in the book, at the end of each chapter, it will talk about a practice like creativity, learning, caring for your body. At the end of each chapter included some of the research that I drew from. It has stories from different participants. And then it recognizes the uniqueness of every woman's life. And so it's not a prescription of here's 3 easy steps for everybody. It's here are some possibilities, right? And so what are some empowering beliefs that you could adopt? Like as you read these stories, you're like, maybe my mantra needs to be, I've got something to contribute today. And I've got a sticker. The world needs what only you can offer. That's one of the quotes from my book. So it's like, it matters that I show up today. There's somebody that needs what I have to offer today, right? So that could be a way of shaping my thinking in the morning that helps me say, I'm going to make a difference, right? And then we get to choose our being as well. And so recognizing this sense of how we show up and to say, if I'm feeling angry or grumpy all the time, I'm probably making judgments or assumptions about people. And I might say, today, I'm going to be curious. My being, I'm going to try to show up curious, right? And so, a phrase like, help me understand. Oh, wow, it seems like you're having a hard day. Help me understand what's going on in your life. Or, wow, I haven't thought of it that way before. It's helping understand, explain your thinking to me. Tell me more about that. And so by choosing, for instance, curiosity over judgment, you're like, wow, I had no idea what was going on in that person's life, that all these other things have already been done, whatever that was. And then I can choose my doing. So I can look at my day and say, what is it that fills me up? What is it that only I can do and contribute to this? Is there something I need to say no to? So by choosing our thinking, our being, and our doing, we start to shift the direction of our life. But it's in practices. It's what we repeatedly do. So the book gives an idea of a practice, different possibilities, and then each chapter ends with reflection questions as well. What are some empowering but are limiting beliefs that you recognize that you have? Empowering beliefs and then some other reflection questions. Is there something you need to, you want to do about this? And reflecting that everybody's path is going to be unique and honoring each person's agency about what they need. So it has a very bright, creativity. I love that you focus on that. Is my creativity, is it knitting? Is it with cooking? Is it creative thinking and how I approach problems? Is it, creativity can have a really broad, we can all be creative. It's not just about being an artist or creating art that somebody says is worthy. It's having multiple possibilities. So the main focus is empowering women to take control of what we can, our thinking, being, and doing. And that could be 15 minutes a day if you're overwhelmed. It could be, I'm going to read and meditate. I'm going to listen to this thing for 5 minutes and I'm going to write a few notes in my book today. So that it has empowering practices that you can be followed. And then when we engage in care, the first session is about the personal work of leadership, careful leadership, how do we care for others and ourselves? And then the empowering, how do we help others? Because I know there are people who said to me, not all my female leaders were caring, right? So there are women who've led in masculine hierarchical ways because that's what they felt they needed to be. That's what's been modeled. That's kind of what's required of them. But I believe that every woman can lead when we start taking control of our thinking, our living, we're doing. We can start making different choices, and people will notice how we're showing up. And we can start doing some of those things that make a difference. And sometimes it might lead to making a change in your life, right? Like if you're really unhappy and you've changed all those things and you're like, okay, there's not a future for me here. I'm not being valued or seen and then that might be a time when we start looking for other options. But to believe that there's always a different future. We can take leadership. We can make different choices in our life that contribute to our well-being, and we can find places where we're valued and where our gifts can be used. And I think we see that pretty quickly in a job situation. I'm sure you've seen this, when I'm sold at one place, you sort of didn't need permission. I asked, I would love to lead a book study on this book I just read. And the ED said, you know what? I'll buy the books and let's do it on our staff development day. And I was like, wow. And then, there was another leader who early on I needed an answer about something. And he's like, you're not supposed to talk directly to me. You're supposed to go through your director. And you're like, and I mean, he was all about the micromanaging and the hierarchy throughout that time. And so we want to find those people. We want to be those people who empower and listen to other voices and empower them to do good work that enhances our workplace, our community, our families. Right? It's all about creating a space where everybody can feel seen and valued and that they belong.
Yeah, I think just that last thing you said about that blockage where I don't think, yeah, I speak a little bit about that in what I've written about, which really is blocking that innovation that could be happening
Mhm.
because you are focused on the order of things or how things have always been done or tradition or, especially like a lot of these legacy institutions. This is a way it's always been. Well, can it be done a different way? Like, does it always,
The world will change.
and getting people to just think about that is, excuse me, getting people to do that is like,
Huge. And I used to laugh because innovation was one of the named values. And I'm like, and yet we need 7 levels of permission for everything. Right? How does that go together? It does not. It does not about innovation. Yeah,
yeah, it's like
primarily.
every organization is like, oh, we're on the cutting edge, but not realizing that innovation takes risk. There's a level of risk. And yeah, that's one of the things I talk about as well is everybody being able to take part in that.
Yeah,
You use creativity as a vehicle. That is one of the fastest ways to flatten hierarchy because everybody can take part in that in some way. You don't have to be expert
yeah,
in whatever's going on. You can do something that so you don't draw well or you're not the best at improv is what I use a lot of the time or you're not an expert in that. And I think sometimes that's scary for people. We've created these environments where if you don't know absolutely everything there is to know about a topic, then don't contribute, don't talk, like don't speak. And that's not okay. So when that part of your title of cultivating wholeness and community is really that for me is opening up and it has to be cultivated. It doesn't just happen because these environments were not built for this. This is something that is a shift and you have to intentionally grow it.
absolutely. It does take intention and that sense of community, like, is everybody thriving? And if not, how do we do things differently, right? What would need to change? These people are thriving, but if these people aren't, what has to change in order for us to do that? And for me, one of my core values is learning. And I used to be quite risk averse, Kathleen, like you. And again, I think boys are encouraged to take risks. I think women are encouraged to play it safe, and fear is cultivated in our lives. Oh, what if? And I used to think, what if I make a mistake? I could wreck everything. And like this was this limiting belief that played in my mind. And it's like, what if I had that wrong and I learned and I did it better the next time, right? I heard this story. I hope it's true. WD-40 is named 40 because that was the 40th iteration of that formula. Like 39 failures before they got to the 40th one, right? So innovation, risks, that didn't work. And then learning, not judgment, but what did we learn from that? And how do we move forward? What's the next step? Because this is what shift I say, before the pandemic, we used to pretend that all kids were at grade level, right? And then after the pandemic, some kids went home and got tutoring, and some kids went home and did nothing. We can't pretend that anymore, right? So that fundamentally changes the way education happens. And are we recognizing that? Do all of our work, our systems are all shifting. It revealed gaps that we were sort of covering up or shifting. So this is a time when we need every voice. And I've often found too, Kathleen. Sometimes it's the new person who comes in and says, "Why are we doing it this way?" And it's just, and I would say as a new principal, I'd say, and I ask two questions. Why are we doing what we're doing, and how's this working for us, right? And I say not from judgment. It's just me being curious about this thing, and to say, wow, this could be different. This could be so much better. We might fail, we might get it wrong, but we might get it fabulously right. Because hey, we're not serving all these people right now. So there's got to be a better way to distribute resources, to create an environment, cultivate. And we will say this with plants, right? When a plant isn't thriving, we don't say, oh, that's a bad seed. There's no, it's like, do I need to water more or less? What's the soil? What is the environment? And to me, leadership is hugely about creating that environment where people feel, I keep saying this, seen, heard, valued, and that they can contribute and belong. And they can take those risks, right? And we can get to a better place together.
Yeah, I think risks when higher ups hear something new, I think they hear how much is this going to cost.
Right. And this is an interesting thing, Kathleen. I always say to my graduate students who are aspiring leaders, could we do better work if we got a lot more money from the government? And in education, I've been in the public and private settings. And I say, yes, we could do more with more money. And are there things we can do now that don't cost any money that could make things better? Yes. It's yes to both of those questions. More money could help. Yeah, we can make changes right now with the resources we have and how we're thinking, how we're showing up, our thinking, being, and doing to change the results that we get, right? So it
I think
has.
that's a great approach because austerity measures and cutbacks and all of these kinds of things are really stressful for folks in organizations, and it lowers morale, and it just has such a ripple effect that's really difficult. So I think reframing it the way you just did is better than saying, oh, we're going to cut this and cut that and save money. It's a very different approach, what you're saying.
And it takes everybody's ideas about how to do things differently, right? It can't be we're cutting and we're doing things the same. No, it's necessity is the mother of invention. It creates that opportunity. And I don't mean that to be an excuse for not properly funding things, but I'm also a board member and not for profits. Like I know funding is tight in many cases. And so that sense of innovation, that sense of collaboration, of really listening well to each other and sharing resources, those practices are so important right now to create workplaces where people can thrive and to do work where our communities are thriving, where everybody has a chance to learn and grow and contribute. Yes.
Thank you so much. This has been such a wonderful conversation. And what are you working on currently? I know you have the book out, but is there
No.
anything else that you want to mention?
Thank you. Yeah. So Kathleen and I'm available as a speaker. I do coaching for women in leadership, and I'm also a facilitator. And one of the skills that I've worked on, I'm now a flow game facilitator. So the flow game is this beautiful facilitation technique that takes story and the serendipity of rolling a dice and multiple perspectives and giving each other wisdom counsel. So I'll be offering opportunities to play the flow game in person and online. And it's just a great way to unlock our thinking. It draws questions from six areas, from leadership, community, vision, action, heaven or big picture perspective, and ground. And so it helps us expand our thinking, either personally in our life about questions that we're holding, or certainly as an organization as well, looking at a new direction, because sometimes we get stuck in a rut. And so I love being able to help people expand their thinking through facilitating flow game or other conversations, because I truly believe that in this time when the world is changing, we need to have different conversations to shape how we're showing up, because we're not going back to pre-pandemic, and neither do we want to. We need to move forward with innovation and creativity and risk taking and in community, right? In hearing everyone's voice and and taking that into consideration so that we can thrive personally and everybody can thrive. We need to play the long game here. It's not going to be getting easier, so we need to care for ourselves and also find that community where we can live in reciprocity. So yeah, and thank you. It's been such a delight to be in conversation today.
Well, that's just wonderful. And mic drop on that. I think that is a perfect way to end this discussion is just naming that again with everybody thriving. You mentioned, yes, these you're thriving over here, but these group of people are not. And so it is important that everybody is experiencing that. And it might sound like it's not possible to do, really difficult to do. I think we kind of just are so used to the way that things have been done, as you said, pre-pandemic, and now it's different.
It's different.
And it's a good thing.
Yeah, to embrace the possibilities. So, and I love to expand my network. LinkedIn is a great place to find me under Dr. Kathy Toogood, and also, as you mentioned, Canopy Consulting. You can connect and we can talk about opportunities, yeah, for speaking or facilitating or coaching. I'd love to walk alongside others to
Well, there
help.
you have it, everybody. If you want to work with Dr. Toogood, you can reach out to her in all the ways. We'll have it in the show notes. And I found her on LinkedIn. You can find her on LinkedIn. Slide into her DMs. That's what I did. And so I'll have the website, your LinkedIn, all of those links in the show notes. It will be really easy for folks to find you. And I wish you a wonderful rest of the summer. I know we don't have too much summer left.
Mhm.
But I hope you have a good rest of it and really appreciate your time today on this Saturday morning with
Thank
us.
you, Kathleen. I appreciate your time. And the book is available through Amazon or you can find that.
Amazing. Awesome. So that's that, everybody. That's Dr. Kathy Toogood. And you can also find my book, Thinking Outside the Boardroom, Creative Solutions in Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Anti-Racism on Amazon and other online platforms and select bookstores. We'll see you next time.